Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, also known as the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals and business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, and strategize and market effectively in the retail value chain. And now, without further ado, let's get into the exciting episode. I have with me today Kyle Jepson and Josh Jewett. Josh has been a guest on here before, but now he's co-host. We're going to be co-hosting several CTOs and CEOs that we'll be talking to about technology. And currently, Josh is an operating partner at New Road Capital Partners, and that's where we met, and I've been extremely impressed with him. You might want to look up his podcast recording I did. I think it's been over a year ago. I'll put it in the show notes, a link to it in the show notes. But he has tremendous experience. He was Chief Information Officer for Dollar Tree stores for 5 years. He was CIO and Senior Vice President of IT at Family Dollar stores for 13 years. And he currently sits on the boards of many medium to small and early stage types of technology companies in this space. So he's very knowledgeable about this. And so Josh and I came up with this idea of a mini-series within the Matt Waller podcast to look at CTOs in this space. Josh, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. I really appreciate it.
Matt, thanks a lot for having me. It's a real pleasure. And let me also turn to Kyle and thank Kyle for joining us today. Kyle, you're our first in this series that Matt talked about. If you would, please introduce yourself. It's Kyle Jepson from Emerge, and give us a little sense of your background and how you became CTO of Emerge.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you, gentlemen, for having me. Excited for the conversation today. I think it'll be fun and engaging. As you said, my name is Kyle Jepson. I'm the CTO here at Emerge, as well as one of the founding members. I've been working in the transportation space for about 12 or 13 years now. Really, I've been focused on the technology side for the large majority of that. But I actually got my start on the operations side, which is a bit different than your typical CTO path. I started off at a company called Global Trans, which is one of the top 10 freight brokers out there, and was lucky enough to get an opportunity to join right out of college what they called their Global Trans Entrepreneurship Program. And at the time, I had no idea how valuable that experience would be, but I actually spent 6 months training in every different department across the organization, learning about all the different roles and responsibilities and how they all came together. And that set one of the best foundations later on in my career as I moved into product and eventually into the engineering side and, overseeing as a CTO of how do all these pieces come together and what are the considerations and impacts that they all have on each other across the organization, especially something as complicated as a freight brokerage at the scale that they go to. So that's really how I got started, was Global Trans, eventually moved into product management and really spent most of my career focused on the product management side. Eventually moved to a company called 10-4 Systems, which is originally created to create the first true transportation marketplace, but they pivoted into the visibility space. And the ideas and kind of learnings that we took from 10-4 are ultimately what started as the concept for Emerge, which is really a focus on the marketplace. So kind of tying that all together, really, had an operations-based start, but shifted into product management. Over the years, spent a lot of time working really closely with engineers and building up my technical skills and pursuing a lot of things on my own, and ultimately moved into the CTO role, kind of overseeing both product and engineering. And it's been a really fun learning experience and an opportunity along the way.
So Kyle, what does a typical day look like for you as CTO at Emerge?
Yeah, so, as CTO, it's really a blend of strategic planning and hands-on problem solving. Every day I'm aligning our technology roadmap and our business goals. I'm making sure our engineering and product teams are tackling the right problems. And collaboration is a huge part of my role. I work really closely with the engineers, the product managers, stakeholders to ensure that we're building the right solutions and that they're scalable and meet our customer needs. I also spend a lot of my time exploring new technologies, particularly recently with kind of the advent of AI and how this is starting to shift things. A good portion of my day is figuring out how are we going to take advantage of these solutions? What are their strengths? And how do we start to integrate these into our overall product roadmap? Really, I view communication as key for both internal and external items. I have to keep our teams aligned. I have to communicate with our customers, and I have to articulate how we're delivering value across our, entire customer base, both internal and external.
Kyle, you mentioned AI, and that's a great segue to the next set of topics I'm going to talk to you about, which is really the technology stack of Emerge and how you're approaching innovation. And I would say that Emerge has been said to be, reinventing freight procurement in the industry. And I'm just curious, I'm sure you endorse that statement, but technology is probably a key enabler for that statement to be made. So talk to us a little bit about the platform and how that platform enables these capabilities that are transformational in the industry.
Yeah, so to start off, traditional freight procurement processes are slow, manual, and inefficient. At Emerge, we've really been changing that by trying to automate a lot of those processes using AI-driven analytics and helping shippers and carriers make smarter decisions. Our platform supports multiple procurement strategies from large RFPs to all the way down to mini bids and eventually down to even spot transactions, giving complete flexibility over how you think about your procurement strategy across all aspects. We've really focused on making our platform easy to use and intuitive. We've focused on making it customizable so that shippers can tailor it to their needs. People have ways that they do business, and a CPG customer is very different from a bulk goods customer. So allowing that type of customization within the software, and as I said, ultimately trying to abstract really complex processes and make them as simple as possible for our end users. So how do we take kind of a PhD level analysis through things like constraint-based optimization and make it so that a 5-year-old essentially could use it? And that's really a lot of the fun and where the magic happens in our platform is taking very complex processes, specifically around optimization and decision-making, and exposing that to our end users in very intuitive ways.
So, Kyle, it is so different. If you've got customers doing bids, carrier bid optimization processes versus using your platform for spot, those are so different. I would think that it would be challenging to bring those together into one platform. Has it been challenging, and what were the key approaches to making that work?
So I would say it's challenging in the sense that those are very different problem spaces. And the way that you think about procurement in the spot, the decision-making process is quite a bit different than in an annual RFP. So from that standpoint, there's a wide range of knowledge and information that you have to think about. But because those are actually run by different people, it's different personas who are responsible for those things. From a platform standpoint, we've been able to break those out. And although they come together in a cohesive platform, you're separating, spot transactions from your contract procurement. So from a technical standpoint, it's actually, we're able to isolate those and keep them very simple and separated. And that allows us to have experts in kind of each of those fields when we think about how we structure our product team and how we structure the engineering teams around those. So from that standpoint, we treat them as very different problem spaces, but we're able to bring them together under a single platform. So overall, I'd say just bringing people in with the right knowledge of how to approach those problems is the hardest part. And then obviously the contract procurement side has a very heavy lift from a technical standpoint with things like constraint-based optimization and the challenges that come with that.
And Kyle, do you find that these capabilities are distinct versus, you're the competitive set that you're often compared with?
Yeah. So, the first thing, and this is something that it comes down from, I think about the differentiation between competition. It starts at a business model perspective and a philosophical perspective, and that cascades through our products and the features that we offer. The first thing that was really interesting, and it's kind of crazy that this was novel and revolutionary, but we were one of the first platforms, or if not the first platform, to really have this idea of what we call bring your own carrier. Many marketplaces or procurement platforms that offered capacity would never let a shipper bring all of their other network capacity to leverage your platform. So not only would we allow you to book through our marketplace, but we allowed you to work with your existing network of providers today. And that was, it seems so simple, but it was really a thought concept that didn't exist in this space because everyone was so worried about, giving up that data or giving up control of the customer. And what we realized is that shippers never have a single provider that they work with specifically and over the road, right? Like you want to diversify your risk. So that was kind of built into the framework and the foundation in our DNA of our platform is we allow you to work with who you work with today while also bringing you net new capacity. So that's kind of the first piece that I think really set it apart. After that, you think about traditional procurement tools, especially on the RFP side, were not actually built for transportation. Jagger and Coupa are probably two of the most widely used ones. People use those from everything from procuring pens and pencils to computers to transportation. So they were not optimized for the workflow of how you procure over the road freight. And then lastly, you did have some freight specific procurement tools, but ultimately they lacked the level of complexity and sophistication that you really needed to run a large network bid and have the tools and analytics and optimization technologies within that. So we were able to bring those three concepts together to really bring something different and fundamentally change the way that our shippers think about procuring by changing the model, changing the focus to be industry specific, and making it incredibly easy and intuitive for them to use.
So you have lots of data as a result of this from the spot market, from the bid optimization process. So you know what's going on with the shippers, what they're looking for, and you know what's going on with carriers. How do you use all that data to provide information that's valuable both to shippers and carriers?
Yeah, so to shippers, we've integrated a lot of data and analytics into our platforms. On the spot side, we have tools that actually suggest the price that we think they're going to pay based on historical behavior. So not only do we understand like the types of carriers that they're going to award to, and we can help them set the right filters and criteria of automating awarding decisions, but we can help them understand what that price point is going to be so that they know how to drive automation decisions based on configurations within the platform. On the contract side, it's how do we take past events, the behavior that we've seen from their carriers, and help them define strategies, both through consulting as well as from a technology standpoint, to make the right decisions of how to optimize their bid, when should they be going to bid, and what is the right strategy based on kind of the current market environment from a awarding standpoint.
Kyle, you touched on AI earlier, and you've also talked about a lot of the broader product capabilities. Would you elaborate a little bit on sort of the technical dimensions of what you're doing with AI and machine learning and to enable some of these business capabilities? I mean, how are you architecting the AI and the machine learning to get to these, whether it's recommendations that you alluded to or other insights that come out of the platform to assist the customer?
Yeah, so I'd say there's two different ways that we think about like the definition of AI within the product. There's more traditional machine learning and like what historically had been AI prior to LLMs and kind of this newer wave of technology changes. For us, those are things like constraint-based optimization, our recommendations models that we do use to match shippers and carriers of who's the right partner for this load. Those are traditional data science. So, we're taking a data set, we're applying models to it, scoring, weighting, and testing those over time. And then on the other side, we do also introduce LLMs to our overall experience to help improve how people interact and or summarize data that we're getting out of different aspects of the procurement process. So I'd say that's much newer and more of kind of a prototype area, given just the nature of how new that is overall. But we're balancing kind of those two areas as we think about introducing AI into the product and specifically focusing on driving us forward.
So your platform uses or offers features like procurement management, intelligence, and integrations. Can you walk us through how these features work and impact the users?
Yeah, so we can start off maybe on the spot side. Procurement management is kind of our baseline platform functionality of how do we take a shipper's quote, find the right network partners as well as marketplace partners to expose that to, review and analyze the rates, and ultimately make an awarding decision, or one of those providers can book it now. So that's really that end-to-end life cycle of taking an opportunity all the way through to the decision of making an awarding decision. And Emerge's platform focuses on driving automation kind of end-to-end through that so that there's no touch. You don't have the swivel chair problem. From the integration standpoint, shippers don't want to leave their system of record, right? They have a TMS, especially these enterprises. So we leverage integrations to pull the data out and actually execute those transactions and push the data back. So this allows our shippers to have a seamless experience and the tools that they use today without having to, learn our tool set overall, without having to change things or change their overall workflow. We're able to integrate our solution into what they use today. And then the data and analytics is kind of scattered throughout both of those. Of the Emerge intelligence is how do we drive those decisions? How do we help people measure the automation that they're implementing? One of the hardest things when you move into automation is people are used to touching transactions manually and having control. And you really have to shift the mindset of you're not taking control at an individual transaction. You're looking at a broader set of automations and a broader set of metrics and saying, okay, what levers do I pull to tweak my desired outcome? So you still have control over the overall experience, but you're controlling it at a higher level to drive automation across your entire business as opposed to managing individual transactions.
I think the platform supports something like 45,000 carriers, doesn't it, Kyle? And I'm just curious how you architected this solution to handle that scale and assure a good performance across the network for customers and carriers.
Yeah, so I think let's start off with, how do we maintain, there's kind of two aspects to that. I think from the question you're asking, one is how do we manage 45,000 carriers? How do we make sure that they're high quality? And then secondly is how do we handle the technical scale and what's, the thing that goes into that. So from a carrier network quality standpoint, there's really three ways that we think about that. It's, how do we think about overall compliance of carriers? Are these carriers meeting safety requirements, insurance requirements, regulatory standards, typical FMCSA type data? So we've put a lot of investment into really understanding how to automate compliance, automation, and verification processes. The second piece is performance management. So, once we know that a carrier is safe, they're not going to commit, fraud or steal loads, they're actively insured. We need to manage performance. So your on time, your tender acceptance, those are all things that we start to look at as kind of a second tier. And then we're continually evaluating both the compliance and performance metrics for a carrier against how they behave with our marketplace, as well as, we also get insight into which shippers those carriers work with as part of their network. So we're able to continuously monitor and kind of refine and tweak our recommendations, but as well as our evaluation of which carriers are the best fit and who are the most stable carriers for shippers to leverage in those lanes. From a technical standpoint, our system is designed from, a microservices architecture. We focus a lot on understanding kind of our end-to-end workflow, and we've integrated load and performance testing into everything that we do so that whenever we launch a new feature, we already know what's going to happen when we have, 10, 15, 100 times the volume that we have today. What are those bottlenecks? What are those pain points? And we spent a lot of time integrating that type of performance testing just into our overall foundation of how we think about software development in our SDLC.
With the processes you deal with, for example, with carrier bid optimization, Yeah, the optimization, a long time ago when this concept first came out, the optimization part was thought of as the real benefit. But over time, people realized it's more of the auctioning process that's valuable, going through iterations. But with all of that, including the spot market itself, you know, as the spot prices change, the uh, adherence to the contracts vary. Yeah, at certain times they start, reneging on the contracts in big numbers. Every time, there's dynamics in the market there. And so, having said that, there's just so many features and functions that could be put into this process. So I'm wondering, how do you balance giving, especially power users, advanced features? Maybe they want multiple rounds. They want to know shadow prices, et cetera, or even quality metrics versus making it user-friendly. A lot of times there's a trade-off in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a conversation and an argument that we have daily whenever we talk about features, right? Is how do you think about making the general platform simple to use? And there's a debate of, depending on how many people are going to use a feature, how complex can it be to interact with it? First and foremost, we are a platform company. We're not, a outsourced development shop for people. So everything we do, we think about, how does this benefit our network overall versus an individual one-off shipper. So we try to bring, first and foremost, a platform that has best practices built into it for the entire network. And then, as I said, we do allow that customization. And as we get into the layers of customization, there can be a little more complexity added to a feature depending on how many people are going to use it. So we really go through a process of thinking, how often will this be used? And who is the type of user that will use it? By nature, some more complicated processes it's okay to make it a more complicated interaction to manage that, if that makes sense. So we go through a lot of design trade-offs there. It's more art than it is science. But generally speaking, we really try to abstract away as much complexity as we can in all cases. And when we do need to give customization, we really put a lot of thought into how many people will utilize that and who is the user. And we will make the right decision around how to integrate that into the broader flow based on kind of those variables.
Kyle, you're in your own background, you have a product management history. I'm just curious for the listeners' benefit. Do you have? Does Emerge have a product organization that you work with? And can you talk a little bit about how, assuming you do, how you and the product team solicit feedback from current customers? Maybe you get it from the sales organization too, when they talk to potential customers, and how you feed that into because you just went through a nice explanation of how you design the solution with the customer in mind. I'm just curious how you and the product team get that feedback from the customer base.
So first and foremost, we do have a product organization. It's one of the best product teams I've ever worked with in my life. Very happy around the folks that we have in that group. They've got a great background ranging from freight to data science, to kind of marketing. So we have a lot of different people who bring unique skill sets and pasts to that team. But zeroing in specifically, how do we think about that customer feedback process? The first thing that we do is our product team spends about 20% of their time talking to shippers, both enterprise shippers as well as smaller shippers, and same thing on the carrier side. So we engage highly with our customers to understand what their pain points are. We work closely with them through the processes, especially when we roll a new feature out. We also have customer advisory boards. So we have a group of shippers that we've selected who meet a couple times a year in person, and we spend all day talking through what features are coming out, doing deep dives into how those are going to behave, and actually having discussions about how that applies to their business and getting feedback. So, we talk to all of our shippers in general. The product team is very close to understand their problems, pain points. We talk to our cab to get very explicit feedback. And then the last piece is, we use data and analytics. So we've spent a lot of time implementing tooling within our products to understand how do users interact with the application? How do we actually measure the things that people are saying? Because one of the things you'll learn through working with customers is people are great at explaining what they want. They really sometimes struggle to explain the problem that they're trying to solve. So our products team goal is really to work back to the problem and try to understand that. And when we really understand the problem, we're then able to put metrics and KPIs in place to say, are we actually making that better? And we can get not just anecdotal feedback from people, but actual measurable results of, did we reduce the cycle time in this process from this to this? Or are we able to save them X number of hours throughout this process? So by putting those metrics in place, we're able to get a great feedback loop to measure the success of, did we achieve what we set out to do?
I would think the truckload transportation business, I know you're broader than that, but that's a lot of what you do, right?
Yep, that's the core focus for us.
So that market is one of the most close to being a perfectly competitive market compared to other modes of transportation and even other types of purchasing processes, procurement processes. And so you were talking earlier how, you all are focused on freight procurement. A lot of the competition is broad procurement, but truckload transportation is so unique in that it is so highly competitive, and in the fact that contracts can be reneged upon legally. They're not legally binding to some degree. So these things are quite unique from a procurement perspective. But in addition to that, I would think, you wind up, right, there's a lot of carriers that leave the market, and there's new carriers that enter the market. And there's shippers that, go from maybe using more of their private fleet to using more for hire carriers. So when those shifts go on with customers, I would think that would be technically challenging. But I'm curious, what I'm getting at is it technically challenging to deal with that kind of a situation? And what are some big technical hurdles you've come across, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, so I'd classify those more as business challenges than necessarily technical challenges per se. I think they somewhat overlap, but really we are a tool for shippers to help navigate that environment. And because we've made our platform so easy to use and so nimble, shippers are able to leverage our tool to make the right decisions. So, that's something we're very proud of. We kind of happened into this by accident, somewhat, but when we first started launching our RFP tool, it was, 2021, and the market was very volatile, right? Like spot rates were going up really dramatically, contracts were falling apart, and existing solutions were very cumbersome. If you're using a Cooper or Jagger, you'd either have to hire a consultant or you'd have like a team of offshore people who knew how to use Coupa. It would take weeks to structure an RFP event, to set it up, to run the event, and you could not respond fast enough to the changes in the market of what was going on. And we launched our solution, which at the time, was a lighter weight version of our software, but it was still built with that idea of how do we make this as easy and simple to use. And people were, rather than spending weeks or even months to run an event, they could build the event, execute it, and be done in a matter of days. So they were able to respond in real time to understand what was going on. And sometimes people would run events just to understand, should I be using my private fleet, or should I put this out to, a for-hire carrier? Previously, they didn't have those types of tools to be able to make the right decisions in real time. And our platform really enabled people to do that because it was so easy to use and it was focused on being able to execute and be nimble. And then over time, we've added a lot more functionality, but we still maintained that you can run a mini bid, very quickly within the platform and get those results that you want. So from our perspective, we view our tool as actually a solution to that problem for shippers, that the industry is dynamic. There's a lot of things going on, and we give people a tool that helps them manage that process and understand what's going on in the market and make the right decision.
Okay, Kyle, we'd like to talk a little bit about challenges and accomplishments, personally, professionally as a leader at Emerge. So let's maybe start with, what was the biggest challenge, technical challenge, that you had to overcome, you and your team, to develop the Emerge platform? And maybe it's a challenge you've not totally overcome, but you're on your way to overcoming it. So talk to us a little bit about that, and help the listeners understand, what it's like to deal with some of the complexities of being a CTO for an early stage software company.
Yeah, so I'd say, and we talk a lot about it a lot here. Kind of the core of a lot of our problem is our constraint-based optimization. So that was really the hardest technical challenge I've ever come across in my life. One, it started off with the user experience. Constraint-based optimization is like an operations research problem. This is something that 20 years ago you would have a room full of PhDs if you were Walmart running these scenarios and going through this. So distilling down the actual concepts of how that works into a simple user interface was kind of that first challenge of, like, how do I give someone a tool to do this and help them understand how to set this up without having any real background or understanding of this problem space, or even what constraint-based optimization is, right? Like, you say that and people's eyes kind of glaze over and you've lost them. So that was really the first piece of, how do you create a user experience and that UI layer to actually execute that. The next challenge came in, how do you run that in a performant way so that people don't have to wait days or weeks to get results back from the constraints that you build. And from a technical perspective, that's one of the few times in my career, we live in this world of like cloud-based deployments. Like, very rarely do engineers have to understand the underlying hardware and think about the code you're running, but also the hardware that it's running on, right? Like, to some degree, engineers deal with that, but for the most part, we're able to outsource that to the cloud. We've actually spent a lot of time understanding, like, at a machine level, what is the best configuration for the optimization solutions that we're working on. And we run a lot of experiments there to increase the output. So we're not only optimizing the code, but we're optimizing the actual hardware configurations for that. And that's been a really fun and kind of unique problem of, going from the UX all the way down to the hardware. How do we think about that problem, and how do we have to solve each specific aspect of that?
One thing that comes to my mind that I'll mention, because I remember I was involved in this back when you had to use tools like CPlex, and there was no user interface. It was setting up the optimization solution. And, it's come a long way. But since truckload transportation is nearly perfectly competitive, you all are providing information, decision-making, and speed in this decision process, which leads to, what economists call Pareto optimal solutions. So it winds up, a solution like this in a market like this results in not only carriers and shippers being better off, but the society as a whole, being better off, because it makes better use of resources. And so that, because I like economics, that came to my mind, and I've been involved in operations research for a long time. But so I can understand this on a macro level, why this is so valuable. But I'm curious, do you have any success stories for, shippers or carriers where, Emerge has really made a difference for them?
Yeah. So we'll talk about two examples that stand out in my mind. One is on the spot side, and the other I'll kind of talk about on the contract side. So the spot side that Josh would actually probably be quite familiar with, given his background, is one of our customers, Dollar Tree, was able to save over $6 million in their first year leveraging our spot platform in just raw savings, not to mention the decision-making time that their team was able to get back. And they were able to do that by leveraging our spot platform to, rather than going out to their backup lanes or their backup carriers in their route guide, prior to, if their primary carrier failed, they would send it to our platform to source a spot rate, and they would make a decision: is that better than the backup rates that I had on file? So by creatively injecting our solution into their overall process, they were able to find and unlock very significant savings that resulted in, actual dollars saved, but also a tremendous amount of time savings from their operations team that they now got to focus on more important things within their supply chain and within their logistics organization. So that was really exciting to see, like, in the first 6 months, to unlock that and bring such such value to that shipper. So that was something we were very proud of, and we thought that was a really good case, especially for an organization. If it's the dollar store, every dollar counts. So that's something that has an impact not only on them but their end consumers. And that's, as you mentioned, kind of the bigger macro picture. That's something that you can kind of feel good about at the end of the day, that you're helping bring that to the people who really need that. On the flip side of that, we have customers like Tyson Foods in the RFP space who started off by, they used to have to hire consultants. They used to have to buy a, several $100,000 a year SaaS solution to run the event. And their first several events had room to be desired and improved upon. As they started working with Emerge, they were able to eliminate the need for the consultant, because our platform, as well as our solutions team, were so supportive of them that they did not need to go hire, a consultant for $100,000 plus a year. They didn't exactly share, but based on other conversations we've had, it's not cheap to go out to those large consulting firms to have them structure your event and run it. In addition to that, we're able to shave off the need for them to buy that tool. And ultimately, the feedback from their carriers and their network after they run it has been that the platform's easy to use, it's intuitive, I understand what I'm working through. So we are saving them significant amount of money in the planning. We're helping them run the event more smoothly, and we're improving the overall relationship that they have with their carrier base and how they're able to communicate and work through that. Because, as we all know, relationships are very important. This might be close to a perfect marketplace from a perfect competition standpoint. However, relationships still really matter in this business, and how you treat your partners is a major reflection of the shipper and how you do business.
Kyle, you're making this sound all really, really easy, but it's being a CTO for an early stage software company is a real challenge, right? I mean, you've got a fixed budget often, you've got finite resources, you've got a lot of different competing interests, right? You have input from the product team, you have input from the sales organization, you've got input from the executive team. Often you're talking to the board about what you can or you can't do. It's a challenging role. Can you talk a little bit of, share some insights with the audience on how, what can they learn from your experience? What are some of the ways that you balance all the competing objectives? You too manage a multi-polarity equation in terms of what you do. It's not just your platform. And talk to us a little bit about how you do that. What are some of the keys to success?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I love about this role is it is complex, and there's not always a one right answer. There's a chain of answers that come together. The first thing that I would say that people have to think about is really find a focus of what are you trying to accomplish. And if you can define that, it makes a lot of the other decisions so much easier if you kind of have that North Star of what are you trying to do. The second thing is figure out who you're solving that for, because you cannot be everything to everyone all at once. That might be your aspiration over time, but as a startup, you really have to be laser focused on, the segment of the market that you're going after and how are you solving it for them. And then lastly, you have to build up trust in your organization to be able to say no. As a leader, if you do not have respect from your peers, your board, it makes it really difficult to make those decisions, as you often have to be the person to say no. I generally try not to make it a hard no. You kind of go back to like the yes ands. So it's always like no, but is how we try to shift that of like, I'm not just the person getting in the way, but I'm trying to help you understand why we're making decisions. Those are kind of the things that I think about that feed into that equation. And then lastly is really just surrounding yourself with smart people. Constantly, I'd say, a lot of folks are afraid to hire people smarter than them. My entire team is smarter than I am in one way or form. So really, it's having those right people around you to help drive those decisions and keep them on track.
Great. Thank you.
So Kyle, you clearly have been extremely successful as a leader, as the CTO of Emerge. And, and I know you're humble, but we would like to know, what are some of the leadership characteristics that you have that you feel like have really helped you succeed as a leader?
Yeah, so I'd say the thing that I put first and foremost, and it's interesting, I think a lot of folks in the transportation industry think about this of hiring athletes because they're hungry. I'm really competitive, and I think at the core, I hate to lose, and that drives pretty much everything that I do, is that sense of competition and wanting to win. And that sets up a lot of other traits and different ways to be successful. But from my perspective, like, that is something that has always driven me, and I think ultimately leads to the successes that I've had. The second side of that is being curious. I love to understand how things work, to dig in deep. And I think as a leader, that's a really important skill, to be able to traverse not just like a higher level strategy, but to dig into the details and reverse engineer something and figure out how it works, why it doesn't. And that's been kind of the second thing that I think is really allowed me to get to where I was just that curiosity and that passion, and it's what I enjoy. So I don't view that as work. It's, something that I end up spending a lot of time on, but it's really driven positive results for me over time.
Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for letting Josh and I interview you. And thank you, Josh, for co-hosting. But Kyle, this really has been impressive, and congratulations on the tremendous success you all have had at Emerge.
Yeah, it's been great. Appreciate you guys having us on.
Yeah, thanks again, Kyle, and thank you, Matt, for being on the program.
If you're finding value in this podcast, we greatly appreciate your support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Additionally, following us on Apple and Spotify and leaving up to a 5-star review would be immensely helpful. We welcome any feedback or questions related to the podcast, as well as suggestions for further topics and guests. You can leave your comments on our YouTube channel, and rest assured that I will read each and every one of them. Please also take a moment to check out our podcast sponsors, as they play a critical role in keeping this podcast running. For more information on specific topics, timestamps, or links to articles mentioned during the podcast, head over to mattwallerpodcast.com.